Hello, and welcome to Encouraging Words with Renae. Today, we're going to be talking about the life of Joseph and how he hit a wall in his life. So, what I want to ask you is, are you hitting a wall? I want you to know you'll get through this. Marathonists, they call it, those people who do the cycling and the running, those marathoners, yeah, those. They call it hitting a wall. And what do they call it? When they come to a point when their bodies say, I can't do anymore. I've exhausted all of my energies. All my muscles are screaming. Their legs and feet feel like they're made of lead. Their respiratory system just screams, stop, just stop. Triathletes call it bonking. As they swim, they ride, they run, they feel their bodies begin to shut down. They're bonked. You don't have to be an extreme athlete to know how it feels to hit a point where it seems you simply can't press on. You can't move another inch. You can't go any further. In these times, the enemy of our soul wants to whisper with a sinister intent, you won't make it. This road is too long, it's too hard, and this is too challenging. So what do you think you're doing? But God speaks a radically different message. Through His Word, by His Holy Spirit, and through the lives of wonderful examples, God describes and declares with heavenly wisdom, you will get through this. It won't be painless, that I can promise you. It won't be quick, but I will use this mess that you've gotten yourself in for good. And in the meantime, don't be foolish or naive, but don't despair either. Don't despair, because I am with you. He wants you to not be dismayed, because He is your God. He will uphold you. He will strengthen you by the right hand of His righteousness. So how are you going to go through all of this? How are you going to do this? If you've hit the wall and you've bonked, like they say, like triathletes say, if the challenge ahead seems unsurmountable, there is a story you absolutely have to hear. And it's about a young man who discovered that God is near even when it seems that there's no way that you can make it through. There's no way that you can make it out. And his name is Joseph. You see, God is ready and able to help you, whatever your dilemma is. If you don't believe it, just ask Him. And his story is a well-known story in the Bible that many people know, but I want to tell it to you today. And you will find him at the bottom of a pit. And it reads, Joseph was the son of Jacob and Rachel. He lived in the land of Canaan with 11 brothers and 1 sister. He was Rachel's firstborn and Israel's 11th son. Of all of the sons, Joseph was loved by his father the most. So he was special. He was favored. That was total favoritism, by the way. Israel even arrayed Joseph with a coat of many colors. Israel's favoritism toward Joseph caused his half-brothers to hate him. And when Joseph was 17 years old, he had 2 dreams that made his brothers plot his demise. In the first dream, Joseph and his brothers gathered bundles of grain. Then all of the grain bundles that had been prepared by the brothers gathered around Joseph's bundle and bowed down to it. In the second dream, the sun's father, the moon, the mother, and 11 stars that represented the brothers bowed down to show Joseph, honor. And when he told these 2 dreams to his brothers, they despised him for the implications that the family, would be bowing down to him. They became jealous that their father would even ponder over Joseph's words concerning these dreams. And these dreams, the You can find them in Genesis chapter 37, verse 1 through 11, if you want to read it for yourself. They saw their chance when they were feeding the flocks. The brothers saw Joseph from afar and plotted to kill him. They turned on him and stripped him of the coat his father had made for him and threw him into a pit. He found himself at the bottom of a pit. As they pondered what to do, the brothers saw a camel caravan of Ishmaelites coming out of Gilead, carrying spices and perfumes. They were taking all this stuff to Egypt, and they wanted to trade it. This is how they made their monies. So Judah, the strongest, thought twice about killing Joseph and proposed that he be sold. The traders paid 20 pieces of silver for Joseph, and the brothers took Joseph's coat back to Jacob, who was lied to and told that Joseph had been killed by wild animals. The biblical story is clear. Joseph was sold into slavery by his brothers, led by Judah. Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites. In Egypt, Potiphar, the captain of Pharaoh's guard, brought Joseph and the Ishmaelites who had brought him down there. While serving in part of his household, God was with him, so he prospered in everything he did. Joseph favored God, and he found favor in the eyes of Potiphar, and so he became his personal servant. Then Joseph was promoted to oversee Potiphar's entire household as a superintendent. After some time, Potiphar's wife began to desire Joseph and sought to have an affair with him. Despite her persistence, he refused her because he feared sinning against God. After some days of begging for him, she grabbed him by the cloak, but he escaped from her, leaving his garments behind. Angered by his running away from her, she took his garment and made a false claim against him by charging that he tried to overtake her. This resulted in Joseph being thrown into prison. The warden put Joseph in charge of the other prisoners, and soon after, Pharaoh's chief cupbearer and chief baker, who had offended the Pharaoh, were thrown into prison. They both had dreams, and they asked Joseph to help to interpret them. The chief cupbearer had held a vine in his hand with 3 branches that brought forth grapes. He took them to Pharaoh and put them in his cup. The chief baker had 3 baskets of bread on his head, intended for Pharaoh, but some birds came along and ate the bread. Joseph told them that within 3 days the chief cupbearer would be reinstated, but the chief baker would be hanged. Joseph requested the cupbearer to mention him to Pharaoh and secure his release from prison. But when the cupbearer was reinstalled to his office, he forgot about Joseph. Isn't that like us human beings? We forget the person that helped us up. After Joseph was in prison for 2 more years, Pharaoh had 2 dreams which disturbed him. He had dreamt of 7 lean cows, which rose out of the river and devoured 7 fat cows, and the 7 withered ears of grain, which devoured 7 fat ears. Pharaoh's wise men were unable to interpret these dreams, but the chief cupbearer remembered Joseph. Now he remembered, and spoke of his skill to Pharaoh. So Pharaoh called for Joseph, and he interpreted his dreams as foretelling the 7 years of abundance would be followed by 7 years of famine. And he advised Pharaoh to store surplus grains during the years of abundance. And when the famine came, it was so severe that the people from the surrounding nations and from all over the earth came to Egypt to buy bread, as this nation was the only kingdom prepared for the 7-year drought. In the 2nd year of the famine, Joseph's half-brothers were sent to Egypt by their father Israel to buy goods. When they came to Egypt, they stood before the vizier, but did not recognize him to be their brother Joseph. However, Joseph did recognize them and did not receive them kindly. Rather, he disguised himself and spoke to them in the Egyptian language using an interpreter. He did not speak at all to them in his native tongue. After questioning them as to where they came from, he accused them of being spies. They pleaded with him that their only purpose was to buy grain for their family in the land of Canaan. And after they mentioned that they had left a younger brother at home, Joseph demanded that he be brought to Egypt as a demonstration of their truthfulness. This brother was Joseph's blood brother, Benjamin. He placed his brothers in prison for 3 days, and on the third day, he brought them and reiterated that he wanted their youngest brother brought to Egypt to demonstrate their truth. The brothers conferred amongst themselves, speaking in Hebrew, reflecting on the wrong they had done to Joseph. Joseph understood what they were saying and removed himself from their presence because he caught an emotion. Joseph sent the brothers back with food, but kept one brother, and the remaining brothers returned to their father in Canaan and told him all that had happened in Egypt. They also discovered that all of their money sacks still had money in them, and they were dismayed. Then they informed their father that Joseph had demanded that Benjamin be brought before him to demonstrate that they were honest men. After they had consumed all the grain that had been brought back from Egypt, Israel told his sons to go back to Egypt for more. With Reuben and Judah's persistence, they pursued their father to let Benjamin go with them, so that when they returned, they would not get any retribution from this Egyptian ruler. Upon their return to Egypt, the brothers were afraid because if they returned the money, when they returned, money was in their sacks. So when they got there, Joseph revealed to them that he was in fact their brother, and that his father Jacob he wanted them to bring him back so that they can all be reunited in Egypt. That was I'm always touched when I read that story because it's such a story of family reconciliation, and it's also a story of the power of God and what he can do despite the wrong that happens in our lives. And I really think that each and every one of us can take something from that story and realize that, life is so precious and life is so fleeting, and we have to take it one day at a time, but we have to use our time as wisely as we can. We can't let one day be wasted or one moment be wasted. We've got to trust God. Look at the life that Joseph ended up having because he found himself at the bottom of a pit. Look at the life you can have. If you would just trust God, he can take you from the bottom of that pit and take you to a palace the way he did for Joseph. In Genesis chapter 50 verse 20 it says, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Then 1 Corinthians chapter 9 verse 24 goes on to say, "Let us not become weary in doing good, because at the proper time we're going to reap a harvest if we don't faint." And then Isaiah 40:31 says, "But they who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run, not get weary. They shall walk and not faint." God doesn't promise that getting through trials will be quick or painless. That certainty wasn't the case for Joseph in the Bible, who was tossed in a pit by his brothers. Then he was sold into slavery, and then he was wrongfully imprisoned because he was accused almost of rape. He was forgotten. He was dismissed. But God ultimately used the intended evil against Joseph for a greater purpose. And he can do that for you. You've just got to trust him. Know that that pit situation that you are in can be turned into a palace situation that you can get out of. God is good. God is faithful. May these words be an encouragement for you today. If you find yourself in the bottom of a pit, God can transfer you to the office of a palace. He is that kind of a God, and he is faithful. Please be encouraged today. God bless you. We'll see you next week.